Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to dive headfirst into this world of generative AI.
Oh, yeah.
And how the U.S. government's trying to figure out how to buy this crazy, powerful technology.
Yeah.
It's kind of like trying to stick a rocket engine on a tricycle. You know? Exciting, but also a little bit terrifying.
It really is remarkable how fast this technology has taken off.
Right.
We've gone from simple predictive text, like your phone suggesting the next word, to AI that can compose music, write code, or even just whim up a photorealistic image of a cat riding a unicorn.
Wow.
All from just a few words.
So it's like having a digital genie that can create anything you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of rubbing a lamp, you're typing on a keyboard.
That's a pretty good analogy. And this guide that we're diving into today, it was made for government acquisition professionals.
Right.
It lays out exactly what generative AI is and how it works.
Okay.
But to start, we need to understand what artificial intelligence, or AI, is in the first place. Basically, it's a software system that can make predictions, recommendations, or decisions based on the data it's fed. Think of it like a super-powered intern that can analyze mountains of information in seconds.
So it's like having a super efficient research assistant that never sleeps and never complains about pulling an all-nighter.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, generative AI takes that concept a step further.
All right.
It's not just analyzing data, it's actually creating new content based on the patterns it's learned.
So instead of just summarizing a document,
Yeah.
it could write a whole new one based on the information it's given.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like giving a chef a bunch of ingredients,
Okay.
and then they whip up a gourmet meal you never even knew was possible.
So it's like teaching a computer to write by feeding it every book in the Library of Congress, and then it suddenly starts churning out original novels in the style of Hemingway or Jane Austen?
Exactly. And the guide highlights how government agencies could use this creative power in a ton of ways.
Okay.
Imagine AI drafting reports, creating training materials, or even guiding citizens through complex processes like applying for a grant or renewing a license.
So instead of wading through pages of bureaucratic jargon on a government website, you could have an AI chatbot that walks you through the process step by step, like a friendly tour guide for government services.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just hypothetical.
Oh, really?
The guide actually gives real-world examples of how agencies are already using generative AI.
Okay.
For example, the Department of Veterans Affairs is using AI chatbots to answer questions from veterans, which frees up human staff to handle more complex issues.
So instead of getting stuck in a phone tree listening to elevator music, you could have a real-time conversation with an AI assistant that can answer your questions about, let's say, filing a disability claim 24/7. That sounds like a major upgrade for everyone involved.
It really is.
Wow.
But of course, with any powerful technology, there are also potential downsides.
Oh, yeah.
And the guide doesn't shy away from those.
Okay, good.
One of the biggest concerns is the risk of misinformation and disinformation. Imagine someone using generative AI to create fake news articles or manipulating social media posts in a way that's almost impossible to detect.
So it's like giving a megaphone to a mischievous troll who can now spread misinformation with incredible speed and sophistication.
That's a good analogy. And it gets even trickier when you consider the issue of bias. These AI models are trained on massive data sets. And if that data contains bias, the AI will inherit it. It's like training a dog with treats that are secretly laced with hot sauce. The dog might learn the trick, but it'll also develop a serious aversion to anything that even smells like treats.
I see. So if we're not careful, we could end up with AI systems that perpetuate existing biases and discrimination, even if that's not our intention.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to approach AI acquisition with a clear understanding of both its potential benefits and its potential risks. The guide emphasizes the need for something called integrated product teams, or IPTs.
IPTs.
Imagine them as a kind of A team for AI acquisition, bringing together experts from across different disciplines, programmers, data scientists, security specialists, ethicists, to tackle this complex challenge.
Just like assembling a team of superheroes. Each with their own unique superpowers to make sure this AI technology is used for good and not for evil.
You got it. And they have another secret weapon: Sandboxes.
Sandboxes, like the ones kids play in at the park.
Well, sort of. In this context, a sandbox is a secure testing environment where government agencies can play around with different AI tools and see how they work before making a big purchase.
So it's like taking a car for a test drive.
Yeah.
Before you sign on the dotted line.
Exactly.
Makes sense. You wouldn't buy a car without kicking the tires and taking it for a spin.
Right.
So why would you invest in a powerful AI system without first understanding its capabilities and limitations?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've explored the potential benefits and risks of generative AI for government, the importance of those multidisciplinary IPTs, the strategic use of sandboxes for testing, and the absolutely critical role of data security and privacy.
Right.
But what about the actual computers that run these powerful AI models?
Yeah.
I imagine they're not your average desktop PCs, right?
You're absolutely right.
Oh.
We're talking about a whole different level of compute and power here.
Okay.
The guide refers to this as specialized computing infrastructure.
Okay.
Imagine a high-tech laboratory packed with powerful servers, specialized chips, and lightning-fast networks.
Wow, so we're talking about serious hardware here.
Yeah.
And I bet those setups come with a hefty price tag, right?
You bet.
Huh.
Building and maintaining this kind of infrastructure is a major investment.
Okay.
And the guide emphasizes the importance of careful planning and budgeting. But for some agencies, the benefits may outweigh the costs.
So it's like deciding whether to build a state-of-the-art research facility or rent some lab space. It all depends on the agency's needs, resources, and long-term goals.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And just like with any big investment, you need to weigh the pros and cons carefully. Do you build your own infrastructure from scratch?
Yeah.
Or do you leverage existing cloud computing platforms?
Right.
It's a complex decision with long-term implications.
Okay, so let's pause here for a second and remind our listeners about the resources available to help them navigate this complex world of generative AI acquisition.
Great idea. The guide highlights some really valuable resources, including a data dashboard that provides insights into past generative AI acquisitions.
Interesting.
Think of it like a map of the AI acquisition landscape, showing you where others have been successful and where they've hit roadblocks.
I see.
That sounds incredibly useful.
Yeah, and I understand there are also resources that address the ethical considerations
of
using AI in government.
One of the key resources mentioned is the Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, which sets ethical guidelines for AI use.
Interesting.
It's like a constitution for responsible AI, making sure this technology is used in a way that benefits society and upholds democratic values.
It's like having a set of guardrails in place to make sure we're not accidentally creating a dystopian sci-fi movie where AI takes over the world.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because ultimately, we want to harness the power of AI for good, not for evil.
Right.
And that requires careful planning, thoughtful implementation, and a commitment to ethical principles. First thing this guide stresses is that sometimes the fastest solution is to not acquire anything new at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So you're saying the government might already have access to generative AI tools without even realizing it? That's like finding a $20 bill in your old jeans.
That's exactly it. You see, generative AI is often delivered through software and cloud-based platforms that agencies might already have. It could be tucked away in an existing software subscription or even in a cloud contract that nobody really reads.
Okay, that makes sense. But what if you've checked all the nooks and crannies?
Yeah.
And those existing tools just aren't cutting it?
Well, then it's time to look at acquiring something new.
Okay.
And the guide provides a roadmap for navigating that process. There are a bunch of different acquisition channels and vehicles available, each with its own pros and cons.
Okay.
Think of it like choosing the right transportation for a cross-country trip.
Okay.
Do you need a reliable minivan?
Yeah.
A speedy train? Or a luxurious private jet?
So it's like picking the right tool for the job, depending on the agency's budget, timeline, and specific needs.
Exactly. But before we go down that road, there's another critical piece of the puzzle we need to talk about.
What's that?
Data.
Go ahead.
Remember, data is the fuel that powers these generative AI engines.
Right.
And just like with any fuel, you need to handle it with care.
Okay, so if data is the fuel, then we need to make sure we're not accidentally pouring gasoline on a campfire, right?
That's a great way to put it. The guide stresses the critical importance of data security and privacy in the context of AI. We're talking about protecting sensitive information, preventing unauthorized access, and making sure that AI isn't spitting out biased or harmful results.
So it's like building a high-security vault to protect precious jewels. You wouldn't just leave them out in the open, right?
Exactly. Like and the guide lays out a comprehensive approach to data management, starting with taking a complete inventory of all the data involved. It's like a librarian carefully cataloging every single book in a massive library.
So we're not just talking about the data the AI uses to learn, but also the data users input into the system. And the data the AI generates as output.
You got it.
Okay.
It's all about understanding where the data comes from, how it's being used, who has access to it, and what safeguards are in place to protect it. It's kind of like signing a prenuptial agreement for data. You want to make sure everyone's clear on the terms and conditions from the get-go.
That's a clever analogy. And this is where those integrated product teams, or IPTs, come into play again, right? They need to work closely with data security experts. And privacy officers to make sure all the necessary precautions are in place.
It's like having a team of cybersecurity ninjas guarding your data fortress. They're constantly on the lookout for threats, patching vulnerabilities, and making sure your data is safe and sound.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've explored the potential benefits and risks of generative AI for government, the importance of those multidisciplinary IPTs, the strategic use of sandboxes for testing, and the absolutely critical role of data security and privacy. But what about the actual computers that run these powerful AI models? I imagine they're not your average desktop PCs, right?
You're absolutely right. We're talking about a whole different level of computing power here. The guide refers to this as specialized computing infrastructure. Imagine a high-tech laboratory packed with powerful servers, specialized chips, and lightning-fast networks.
Wow. So we're talking about serious hardware here. I bet those setups come with a hefty price tag, right?
You bet. Building and maintaining this kind of infrastructure is a major investment. And the guide emphasizes the importance of careful planning and budgeting. But for some agencies, the benefits may outweigh the costs.
So it's like deciding whether to build a state-of-the-art research facility or rent some lab space. It all depends on the agency's needs, resources, and long-term goals.
Exactly. And just like with any big investment, you need to weigh the pros and cons carefully. Do you build your own infrastructure from scratch? Or do you leverage existing cloud computing platforms? It's a complex decision with long-term implications.
Okay, so let's pause here for a second. Remind our listeners about the resources available to help them navigate this complex world of generative AI acquisition.
Great idea. The guide highlights some really valuable resources, including a data dashboard that provides insights into past generative AI acquisitions.
Interesting.
Think of it like a map of the AI acquisition landscape, showing you where others have been successful and where they've hit roadblocks.
That sounds incredibly useful. And I understand there are also resources that address the ethical considerations.
Absolutely. Assembling the right team is crucial. We need those integrated product teams, or IPTs, to guide the process.
Like we talked about earlier, those IPTs are like the all-star team for AI acquisition. Bringing together experts from different fields to make sure that this project doesn't crash and burn.
And once that team is in place, the first order of business is to clearly define the agency's goals and needs.
So it's like planning a vacation.
You
wouldn't just book a random flight and hope for the best, would you?
Definitely not. You need to know where you're going, what you want to do, how much you're willing to spend, before you start making reservations.
Makes sense.
Exactly. The guide emphasizes the importance of understanding what specific problems the agency wants to solve with generative AI.
All right, so are they looking to automate tasks, improve decision-making, enhance citizen services? It's all about matching the right tool to the right job.
It is. It's like choosing the right kitchen appliance. You wouldn't use a blender to bake a cake. or a food processor to make a smoothie.
Makes sense.
Perfect analogy. And once you've identified those goals and needs, the next step is to start exploring potential solutions.
Right.
This is where those AI sandboxes we discussed earlier come in handy.
Yes, the AI playgrounds where agencies can test drive different tools and see how they handle in a safe environment. It's like trying on clothes before you buy them to make sure they fit.
Exactly. But here's the twist. The guide kind of throws in a curveball here.
What's that?
It says, the fastest solution might be to not acquire anything new at all.
Hold on a second. You're going to have to explain that one.
Okay.
How can you acquire something without actually acquiring it? Is this some kind of government magic trick?
Not quite magic.
Okay.
But it can feel like it. Remember how we talked about generative AI often being delivered through cloud platforms or existing software?
Yeah.
There's a chance your agency already has access to some basic generative AI tools through existing contracts or subscriptions.
So it's like discovering a hidden stash of cash in your attic that you completely forgot about.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're richer than you thought.
That's a great way to put it. The guide encourages agencies to thoroughly investigate their existing resources before embarking on a new acquisition.
Right.
It could save them time, money, and a whole lot of headaches.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
But what if you've exhausted all those other options?
Right.
And you absolutely need to acquire a new AI system.
Well, then it's time to explore those different acquisition channels and vehicles.
Okay.
We mentioned earlier, the guide lays out several options.
Okay.
From government-wide acquisition contracts to more specialized vehicles.
Okay.
Used by agencies like the Department of Defense or NASA. Think of it like choosing the right transportation method for a journey.
Okay. So it's all about finding the best fit for your agency's specific needs and budget.
Exactly.
You wouldn't want to end up stuck on a slow-moving freight train when you need to get somewhere fast.
Exactly. And the guide provides detailed information on the different contract types, acquisition strategies, and best practices for ensuring a successful acquisition.
Okay, so let's bring it all home for our listeners.
Right.
What are the key takeaways they should remember about acquiring generative AI for government use?
I think the most important thing is to approach this process strategically and thoughtfully. Don't rush into it without a clear understanding of your goals, needs, and resources.
It's like building a house, right?
Yeah.
You need a solid blueprint, a skilled team of contractors, and a clear budget before you start digging the foundation.
And don't forget to leverage those resources we discussed. The data dashboard, the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, and of course, this incredibly helpful guide.
Yeah.
They're like your toolkit for navigating this complex and exciting world of generative AI acquisition.
Well, folks, there you have it. We've explored the potential of generative AI, the challenges of acquisition, the importance of data security, and the need for ethical considerations.
Absolutely.
We've laughed, we've learned, and hopefully we've equipped you with the knowledge and confidence to tackle this transformative technology head on.
It is transformative.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions,
keep learning,
and keep diving deep.
Dive deep.